It is 3 a.m. The room is dark, the house is quiet, and your brain is absolutely on fire. You're thinking about something you said 6 years ago at a party. You're replaying a conversation that ended badly. You're calculating your finances, rehearsing an argument, or suddenly, out of nowhere, wondering whether you locked the front door. Your body is exhausted, but your mind refuses to stop. And no matter how hard you try to think of nothing, thinking of nothing is just another thing your brain is thinking about. You're not broken. You're not anxious in some unusual way. What is happening to you at 3 a.m. has been happening to humans for hundreds of thousands of years. And the reason why is far stranger than you think. Your brain does not experience time the way you do. During the day, you are busy. You are moving, talking, reacting, deciding. Your brain is constantly processing the present moment. But at night, when the input stops, something shifts. The parts of your brain responsible for monitoring threats, scanning for problems, and rehearsing future scenarios do not simply turn off. They keep running. And in the silence and darkness of 3 a.m., with nothing immediate to attend to, they run louder than ever. Neuroscientist Matthew Walker, who spent decades studying sleep at the University of California, Berkeley, found something revealing about the sleeping and pre-sleep brain. The default mode network, a set of interconnected brain regions that activate when you are not focused on any specific task, becomes extraordinarily active during the night. This is the network responsible for rumination, self-reflection, future planning, and autobiographical memory. In other words, the part of your brain most likely to spiral is also the part most likely to take the wheel the moment you lie down and close your eyes. But why? Why would evolution design a brain that torments you when you are trying to rest? Because rest for most of human history was dangerous. Think about what sleep meant for your ancestors. Not sleep in a locked apartment with a deadbolt and a security system. Sleep on the ground. Sleep in the open air or in shallow caves, surrounded by predators that hunted at night. Sleep when your fire was low and the sounds around you were unfamiliar. For hundreds of thousands of years, the humans who survived were not the ones who fell into deep, blissful unconsciousness the moment the sun went down. They were the ones who stayed alert, the ones whose brains kept scanning even in rest, the ones who woke at the slightest sound and immediately started asking the most important question a human can ask. Is something wrong? That question is still running in your head right now. It never stopped. It just traded lions for unanswered emails. Sleep researchers call this hyperarousal. Psychologist Harvey Alloway at the University of Glasgow studied the relationship between evolutionary threat detection and what he called pre-sleep cognitive activity, a fancy term for the storm of thoughts that arrives when you get into bed. His findings pointed to something that felt almost paradoxical. The more your body relaxes, the more your threat monitoring systems try to compensate. As your muscles release tension and your heart rate slows, your brain interprets that loss of control as a potential vulnerability. And so it starts checking. It starts reviewing. It starts asking, did I miss anything? Is there something I should have handled? Is tomorrow going to be okay? You are not anxious because something is wrong with you. You're anxious because something is right with you. In an ancient and deeply inconvenient way, there is another layer to this. Your body runs on a chemical clock. Cortisol, the hormone most associated with alertness and stress response, follows a precise daily rhythm. It peaks in the morning, helping you wake up and face the day. It drops in the evening, preparing you for sleep. But around 3 a.m., it begins to rise again, slowly at first, then more sharply as dawn approaches. This cortisol surge is biological preparation for waking. It is your body getting ready to face the world again. But if you happen to wake up naturally in the middle of that surge, which millions of people do, you will find yourself not only awake, but charged with a low-level chemical alertness that your brain immediately interprets as a signal to start thinking. Endocrinologist Eve Van Cotter at the University of Chicago spent years mapping cortisol rhythms and their effects on sleep and cognition. She found that the cortisol rise in the early hours of the morning had measurable effects on working memory, emotional reactivity, and the brain's threat assessment circuits. In other words, 3 a.m. is not just quiet. It is chemically primed for worry. And then there is the darkness itself. Humans are visual creatures. More of your brain is devoted to processing sight than any other sense. During daylight, visual information floods your cortex and gives your brain constant grounding in the physical world. You can see where you are. You can see that there is nothing wrong. But in complete darkness, that stream of reassuring information disappears, and your brain, which has not fundamentally changed since the Paleolithic, responds to that absence the way it always did. It fills the void with its own content. It starts generating. It starts imagining. It starts running simulations of everything that could go wrong, because in a dark, ancient world, running those simulations might have been the thing that kept you alive. The thoughts that surface at 3 a.m. are not random. Pay attention to them and you will notice a pattern. They almost always cluster around threat, loss, or unresolved problems. Not the things that went well today. Not the things you are looking forward to tomorrow. The things that are incomplete. The things that scared you. The things you tried not to think about all day while you were busy surviving the present moment. Psychologists call this the Zygarnik effect. In the 1920s, Russian psychologist Bluma Zygarnik discovered that the human brain remembers incomplete tasks far more vividly than completed ones. She noticed this first in a restaurant, watching a waiter recall extraordinarily precise details about open orders, but forget them almost instantly once the bill was paid. The brain, she theorized, keeps an active mental file on unfinished business. It cannot close the loop until the problem is resolved. And at 3 a.m., with the distractions of the day stripped away, all those open files come flooding forward. You're not doing this on purpose. Your brain is doing what it was built to do. It is managing your unresolved business. It is preparing you for tomorrow. It is scanning for threats in the dark. It is the same brain that helped your ancestors survive the long, dangerous nights of the Pleistocene. The problem is not the brain. The problem is that you are safe, but your brain has not been told. Here's what that means for you tonight. The standard advice for 3 a.m. thinking is to fight it, to try harder to relax, to count sheep, to force the mind quiet. But that strategy almost never works, because effort is itself a form of arousal. The harder you try to stop thinking, the more activity you generate in exactly the circuits you are trying to quiet. It is like telling someone standing at the edge of a cliff not to think about falling. What the research suggests instead is something stranger. Rather than suppressing the thoughts, acknowledge them. Neuroscientist Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan has studied what he calls distanced self-talk, a technique in which you observe your own mental activity from a slight remove, as if watching someone else think. He found that this approach, addressing yourself by name rather than in the first person, reduced emotional reactivity and disrupted the feedback loop of rumination. You become a witness to the thoughts rather than a prisoner of them. Write it down. Literally. Get a notebook. In study after study, the simple act of externalizing an unresolved problem, putting it somewhere outside your own head, has been shown to reduce the urgency the brain assigns to it. The Zygarnik loop does not require that you solve the problem. It only requires that you register it. A note that says, "I will deal with this tomorrow," is enough to quiet the alarm. And breathe. Not because breathing is a magic trick, but because slow, deliberate breathing is one of the only direct inputs you have into your autonomic nervous system. A long exhale activates the vagus nerve, which signals the parasympathetic system, which tells the cortisol spike to settle down. Your body, which started this whole cascade, can also end it. But here's the thing you should carry with you past 3 a.m. and into daylight. Those thoughts that haunted you in the dark were not your enemy. They were your brain being loyal. They were your mind doing the ancient work of keeping you alive, rehearsing threats, preparing for the unknown, watching over you in the long darkness the way your ancestors watched over each other around a fire that was slowly going out. The world is safer now. The threats are different. The darkness outside is not full of predators anymore. But the darkness inside, the part of you that wakes at 3 a.m. and starts asking whether everything is okay, that part of you is not a malfunction. It is the oldest part of you. It is the part that made sure you got here at all. So tonight, when the room goes dark and the quiet comes and your brain lights up with every unresolved, unfinished, and uncertain thing you have ever tried to outrun, know this: your ancestors lay in the dark and thought the same kinds of thoughts, and in the morning they got up anyway, and so will you.